The Coronation Honours 1911 for the British Empire were announced on 19 June 1911, to celebrate the coronation of George V, which was held on the 22nd of June 1911. The recipients of honours are displayed here as they were styled before the new honour and arranged by honour, with classes and then divisions as appropriate. Order of the Crown of India, Princess Victoria Elizabeth Augustine Charlotte, Hereditary Princess of Saxe-Meiningen, Princess Victoria Patricia Helena Elizabeth of Connaught. Order of the Garter, George Adolphe Frederick August Victor Ernest d'Albert Gustave Guillaume Wellington, Grand Duke of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, John Douglas Sutherland, Duke of Argyll, KT, GCMG, GCVO. Alexander William George, Duke of Fife, KT, GCVO. Order of the Thistle, Walter John Francis, Earl of Mar and Gully, Donald James Baron Ray, GCSI, GCIE. Order of St. Patrick, Anthony, Earl of Shaftesbury, KCVO. Field Marshal Horatio Herbert, Viscount Kitchener of Khartoum, GCB, GCSI, GCIE. Order of the Bath, Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath Civil Division Major Prince Adolphus Charles Alexander Albert Edward George Philip Louis Ladislaus, Duke of Teck, GCVO, CMG. Major Prince Alexander Augustus Frederick William Alfred George of Teck, GCVO, DSO. Edward Baron Macnaghten, GCMG, Sir William Edward Goshen, GCMG, GCVO, Sir Charles Inigo Thomas, KCB, Sir Kenneth Augustus Muir Mackenzie, KCB, KC, Sir Courtney Peregrine Ilbert, KCB, KCSI, CIE. Military Division Admiral of the Fleet Sir Arthur Dalrymple Fanshawe, GCVO, KCB. Admiral Sir Louis Anthony Beaumont, KCB, KCMG. Admiral Sir Arthur William Moore, KCB, KCVO, CMG. Admiral Sir Charles Carter Drury, GCVO, KCB, KCSI. Admiral Sir Wilmot Hawksworth Fawkes, KCB, KCVO. Admiral Lord Charles William Delaporte Beresford, GCVO, KCB, MP. Admiral Sir William Robert Kennedy, KCB. Admiral Sir William Henry May, GCVO, KCB. General Sir Archibald Hunter, KCB, DSO, Governor and Commander-in-Chief Gibraltar. General Sir Henry John Thoroton Hildyard, KCB, Colonel, the Highland Light Infantry. General Sir Robert MacGregor Stewart, KCB, Colonel Commandant, Royal Artillery. General Sir Beecham Duff, KCB, KCSI, KCVO, CIE, Indian Army, Military Secretary, India Office. General Sir Henry MacLeod Leslie Rundle, KCB, KCMG, DSO, Colonel Commandant, Royal Artillery, Governor and Commander-in-Chief Malta. General Sir Edward Stedman, KCB, KCIE, Unemployed Supernumerary List, Indian Army. General Sir Charles Whittingham Horsley Douglas, KCB, General Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Southern Command. Knights Commander of the Order of the Bath Civil Division Vice Admiral Arthur Mostyn Field, FRS. James Alfred Ewing, CB, FRS. James Brown Marshall, CB. Hay Frederick Donaldson, CB, Chief Superintendent of the Royal Ordnance Factories. Colonel Hugh, Earl Fortescue, ADC, His Majesty's Lieutenant for the County of Devonshire. President and Chairman Devonshire Territorial Force Association. Honorary Colonel Sir George Jackson Hay, KNT, CB, CMG, late 3rd Battalion, the Prince of Wales's own. Honorary Colonel Morgan George Lloyd, CB, late 3rd Battalion, the Royal Irish Regiment. Honorary Colonel William Alexander Hill, CB, late 3rd Battalion, the Gloucestershire Regiment. Colonel Edward Thomas Davant Cotton Jodrell, CB, Deputy Assistant Director, Territorial Force War Office. Colonel Thomas Sturmey Cave, CB, Brigade Commander, South Midland Infantry Brigade. Colonel Henry George Lewis Crichton, ADC, late Brigade Commander, Hampshire Light Infantry. Colonel Lancelot Ralston, DSO, Brigade Commander, Nottinghamshire and Derby Mounted Brigade. Colonel Aldred Frederick George Beresford, Earl of Scarborough, CB, ADC, Brigade Commander, Yorkshire Mounted Brigade. Chairman West Riding of Yorkshire Territorial Force Association. Sir Frederick Fitzjames Cullinan, CB. James Stuart Davy, CB. James Miller Dodds, CB. Sir Almeric William Fitzroy, KCVO. Lieutenant Colonel Sir Charles Arthur Andrew Frederick, GCVO. Sir Francis Charles Gore, William Graham Greene, CB. Frederick Arthur Herzl, CB. Sir Robert Hunter, CB. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Burness Mahadi, CB. Re. Sir Charles William Matthews, John Paget Mellor, CB. Horace Cecil Munro, CB. Charles Algernon Parsons, CB.R. D. Major Ronald Ross, CB. FRCS. Edward Pearson Thesiger, CB. Benjamin Arthur Whiteleg, CB. MD. Military Division Admiral Henry Coe Kane, CB. Vice Admiral George Fowler King Hall, CVO. Vice Admiral Sir Alfred Wyndham Paget, KCMG. Vice Admiral Sir John Rushworth Jellicoe, KCVO, CB. Rear Admiral Thomas Hounsome Butler Fellows, CB. General William Campbell, CB, RMA. General Francis William Thomas, RMLI. Inspector General of Hospitals and Fleets Doyle Money Shaw, CB. Inspector General of Hospitals and Fleets Thomas Desmond Gimlett, CB. Chief Inspector of Machinery James Roffey, CB. Chief Inspector of Machinery John Harold Heffernan, CB. Paymaster-in-Chief John Samuel Moore, CB. Major General Lord Ralph Drury Kerr, CB. Colonel 10th Hussars. General George Francis Bevel, CB. Unemployed Supernumerary List, Indian Army. Major General Henry Hallam Parr, CB. CMG. Colonel, the Prince Alberts. Colonel and Honorary Major General John Palmer Brabazon, CVO, CB. General Horace Mole Evans, CB. Unemployed Supernumerary List, Indian Army. Veterinary Colonel Francis Duck, CB. Late Director General, Army Veterinary Department. Colonel William Hugh Mortimer, CB. Late Army Pay Department. Major General Alfred William Lambert Bailey, CB, CSI, DSO, Indian Army. Major General John George Ramsey, CB, Indian Army, commanding Bangalore Infantry Brigade. Lieutenant General John Eccles Nixon, CB, Indian Army, commanding 1st Division. Lieutenant General John Pumptre Glynn, Colonel Commandant, the Rifle Brigade. Major General George Mackworth Bullock, CB, Colonel, the Devonshire Regiment, commanding West Riding Division, Northern Command. Major General Alexander Nelson Rochford, CB, CMG, Lieutenant Governor and commanding the troops, Jersey District. Major General Francis Lloyd, CVO, CB, DSO, commanding Welsh Division, Western Command. Lieutenant General James Moncrief Grierson, CVO, CB, CMG. Colonel and Honorary Major General Francis Edward Mulcahy, CB, late Army Ordnance Department, Director of Equipment and Ordnance Stores. War Office. Major General Edward Owen Fisher Hamilton, CB, Lieutenant Governor and command the troops, Guernsey and Alderney District. General Sir Lawrence James Oliphant, KCVO, CB, General Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Northern Command. Lieutenant General Frederick Walter Kitchener, CB, Governor and Commander-in-Chief, Bermuda. Major General John Spencer Ewart, CB, ADC General, Adjutant General to the Forces. Surgeon General Adam Scott Reed, CB, Indian Medical Service. Major General John Blaxall Woon, CB, Indian Army, commanding 9th Division. Lieutenant General Charles Hamilton Desvaux, CB, Indian Army. Lieutenant General Alfred Astley Pearson, CB, Indian Army, commanding 3rd Division. Major General Henry Montague Packington Hawks, CB, CSI, Indian Army. Major General Archibald James Murray, CVO, CB, DSO, Director of Military Training, War Office. Surgeon General William Launcelot Gubbins, CB, MVO, KHS, Director General, Army Medical Service. Major General George Barker, CB, commanding Eastern Coast Defences, Eastern Command. Major General Herbert Napier Bunbury, CB, Companions of the Order of the Bath Military Division. Rear Admiral Arthur Henry Limpus. Rear Admiral Robert Hathorne Johnston Stewart, MVO. Rear Admiral William Lowther Grant. Rear Admiral David Beatty, MVO, DSO. Rear Admiral Ernest Charles Thomas Trowbridge, CMG, MVO. Captain Horace Lambert Alexander Hood, MVO, DSO, RN. Captain William Osbert Boothby, MVO, RN. Captain Roger John Brown Lokes, MVO. Colonel James Henry Bohr, CMG, ADC, RMA. Lieutenant Colonel Algernon Street, Ledger Burrows, RMLI. Lieutenant Colonel Godfrey Estcourt Matthews, RMLI. Engineer Rear Admiral John Stocker Sanders. Inspector General of Hospitals and Fleets Charles Kane Godding. Inspector General of Hospitals and Fleets Arthur William May. Paymaster-in-Chief John Henry George Chappell, MVO. Paymaster-in-Chief Francis Harrison Smith. Major General Sir Charles Ferguson BT, MVO, DSO, Inspector of Infantry. Surgeon General James Gowson McNeice, Principal Medical Officer, 8th Division, India. Surgeon General George Windsor Robinson, Principal Medical Officer, Aldershot Command. Colonel Robert McGaw-Wyland, CMG, Army Pay Department, Chief Paymaster War Office. Colonel Charles Rudyard Simpson, commanding 5th Infantry Brigade, Aldershot Command. Colonel Samuel Charles Norton Grant, C.M.G., Director General of the Ordnance Survey. Colonel Anthony John Abbey, commanding Royal Horse and Royal Field Artillery, South Africa. Colonel Herman James Shelley Landon, commanding 3rd Infantry Brigade, Aldershot Command. Colonel Edward John Graney, military attaché, Rome and Bern. Colonel James Thomason Johnston, Haypay. Colonel Francis Algernon Curtis, commanding Western Coast Defences, Western Command. Colonel Charles Edward Hayres, Chief Engineer, Eastern Coast Defences, Eastern Command. Lieutenant Colonel and Brevet Colonel Hugh Penton Shackleton, commanding 1st Battalion, the Prince of Wales's Volunteers. Colonel Edmund Donner John O'Brien, commanding Potchefstroom District, South Africa. Colonel Arthur Dashwood Bulkley Buckley, Assistant Adjutant General, War Office. Colonel Andrew Graham Thompson, Commandant, Royal Military Academy, Woolwich. Colonel Montague Creighton Curry, D.S.O., commanding No. 4 District, Western Command. Colonel Edmund John Phipps Hornby, V.C., commanding Royal Artillery, 4th Division, Eastern Command. Colonel Henry Huntley Leith Malcolm, D.S.O., half pay. Colonel John Edward Watson, half pay. Colonel Walter Norris Congreve, V.C.M., VO, Commandant, School of Musketry, Hythe. Colonel William Riddle Birdwood, C.SI.C.I.E.D. S.O.A.D.C. Indian Army, Brigade Commander, Kohat Brigade. Colonel Frederick Charles Alman Gilpin, Assistant Director of Supplies and Transport, Southern Command. Colonel Kenneth Edward Lean, General Staff Officer, 1st Grade, India. Lieutenant Colonel and Brevet Colonel the Honourable Charles Granville Fortescue, C.M.G.D. S.O. Commanding 1st Battalion, the Rifle Brigade. Colonel George Arthur Cookson, Indian Army, Brigade Commander, Bangalore Cavalry Brigade. Colonel Robert Arundel Kerr Montgomery, D.S.O. General Staff Officer, 1st Grade, 1st Division, Aldershot Command. Colonel John Fowle, Assistant Director of Remounts, War Office. Colonel Francis Alexander Fortescue, Brigade Commander, Devon and Cornwall Infantry Brigade. Colonel Granville Roland Francis Smith, Assistant Adjutant and Quartermaster General, London District. Colonel Charles William Thompson, D.S.O. General Staff Officer, 1st Grade, Western Command. Colonel George McIntosh, half pay. Colonel Henry Urban Keary, D.S.O. A.D.C. Indian Army, Brigade Commander, Garhwal Brigade. Colonel Charles John Mellis, V.C.A. D.C. Indian Army, Brigade Commander, Faizabad Brigade. Colonel Hugh O'Donnell, D.S.O. Indian Army, Brigade Commander, Bannu Brigade. Colonel Ernest Hunter Rodwell, Indian Army, Brigade Commander, Secunderabad 2nd Brigade. Colonel William Edwin Bunbury, Indian Army, General Staff, Northern Army, India. Colonel Philip Mannering Carnegie, Indian Army, Brigade Commander, Abbottabad Brigade. Colonel James Gibbon Turner, Indian Army, Brigade Commander, Rizalpur Cavalry Brigade. Colonel Edmund Butler Burton, Indian Army. Colonel Herbert James, Indian Army. Colonel St. George Loftus Steele, Indian Army, Assistant Quartermaster General, India. Colonel Richard Boileau Gaisford, C.M.G., Assistant Quartermaster General, Scottish Command. Colonel Richard MacDougall Brisbane Francis Scully, D.S.O. Commanding Royal Artillery, Southern Coast Defences, Southern Command. Colonel Paul Rycourt Stanbury Churchwood Commanding Middlesex Infantry Brigade, Eastern Command. Colonel John Arthur Tanner, D.S.O. General Staff Officer, 1st Grade, India. Colonel Claude Arthur Bray, C.M.G. Army Pay Department, Command Paymaster, Southern Command. Colonel George Macaulay Kirkpatrick, Inspector General, Military Forces, Commonwealth of Australia. Colonel Aylmer Gould Hunter Weston, D.S.O. General Staff Officer, 1st Grade, War Office. Colonel Henry Ernest Stanton, D.S.O. A.D.C. Royal Artillery. Colonel Hugh Gregory Fitton, D.S.O. A.D.C. Assistant Adjutant General, Eastern Command. Colonel Charles Rutherford, C.M.G. Principal Veterinary Officer, India. Lieutenant Colonel and Brevet Colonel George Ralph Collier Westrop, Indian Army. Colonel Ernest William Stewart King McConchie, C.I.E.D. S.O. Indian Army, Deputy Secretary, Army Department, India. Colonel Michael Joseph Tay, D.S.O. Indian Army. Colonel James Marshall Stewart, A.D.C. Indian Army. Colonel Robert Smyton McLagan, Superintending Engineer, 2nd Grade, Public Works Department, India. Colonel Charles Fancourt Willis, Indian Medical Service, Principal Medical Officer, 5th Division. Colonel Walter Pippin Braithwaite, Commandant, Staff College, Quetta. Colonel William Cross Barrett, D.S.O. Indian Army. Colonel V.Z. Thomas Bunbury, D.S.O. Half Pay. Colonel George Benjamin Hodson, D.S.O. Indian Army. Colonel Thomas Granger, Indian Medical Service, Principal Medical Officer, Burma Division. Colonel Charles Massey Matthew, D.S.O., Assistant Director of Ordnance Stores, Southern Command. Civil Division Inspector General of Hospitals and Fleet Todd. Fleet Surgeon Percy William Bassett Smith. Engineer Rear Admiral Robert Mayston. Engineer Rear Admiral Charles Lane. Naval Instructor Arthur John Parrish. Robert Edmund Froude, FRS. Arnold William Reinald, FRS. Rear Admiral Herbert Edward Puri Cust. Colonel Simeon Hardy Exum, Re. Commander Frederick William Weber, RNR. Commander James Thomas Walter Charles, RNR. Commander William Hazel, RNR. Commander Rupert Edward Cecil Guinness, CMG, RNVR. Commander James Marquis of Graham, CVO, RNVR. Commander Edward William Lloyd, RN. Major General John Stephen Cowens, M.V.O. Director General of the Territorial Force War Office. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Stevenson Robert Clark, commanding 3rd Battalion, the Royal Sussex Regiment. Colonel Robert Campbell Mackenzie, Brigade Commander, Highland Light Infantry Brigade. Colonel Herbert Hughes, C.M.G., Brigade Commander, 3rd West Riding Infantry Brigade. Colonel Peter Broom-Giles, Administrative Medical Officer, 1st London Division. Frank Dudley Docker, ESQ. Colonel Henry Streetfield, M.V.O., Vice Chairman, Kent Territorial Force Association. Lieutenant Colonel James Clark, K.C., commanding 9th Battalion, the Royal Scots, member, City of Edinburgh Territorial Force Association. Colonel Sir Thomas Glencoats Bart, His Majesty's Lieutenant for the County of Renfrewshire, President, Renfrewshire Territorial Force Association. Frank Shoolbred, ESQ. Donman Mosley, ESQ, Chairman, Buckinghamshire Territorial Force Association. Robert Martin Holland, ESQ, Member, County of London Territorial Force Association. Colonel Joseph Henry Russell, Baron Glenisk, D.S.O., His Majesty's Lieutenant for the County of Brecknockshire, President, Brecknockshire Territorial Force Association. Colonel James Edward Edmonds, General Staff Officer, 1st Grade, 4th Division, Woolwich. Major General Charles Ernest Heath, C.V.O., Director of Transport and Remounts, War Office. Colonel Henry Capel Loftholden, F.R.S., Superintendent, Royal Gun and Carriage Factories, Woolwich Arsenal. Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Ellison Rhodes James, F.R.C.S., Royal Army Medical Corps, Attached General Staff, War Office. Major General Cecil Frederick Neville Macready, C.B., Director of Personal Services, War Office. Brigadier General Frederick Rainsford Hannock, Director of Fortifications and Works, War Office. Major General Richard Matthews Ruck, Major General in charge of Administration, Eastern Command. Colonel Henry Charles, Viscount Harding, A.D.C., commanding 6th Battalion, the Rifle Brigade. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel the Honourable William Charles Wordsworth Rollo, commanding 3rd Battalion, the Black Watch. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Henry Crosby, commanding 3rd Battalion, the Manchester Regiment. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Morgan William O'Donovan, commanding 4th Battalion, the Royal Munster Fusiliers. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel John William Merton McCartney, commanding 2nd Battalion, the Royal Guernsey Militia. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Reginald Barclay, commanding 3rd Battalion, the Duke of Edinburgh's. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Charles Waring Darwin, commanding 3rd Battalion, the Durham Light Infantry. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Edsel Morgan Lindsay, commanding Royal Monmouthshire Royal Engineers. Colonel George Sampson Elliston, Administrative Medical Officer, East Anglian Division. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Robert Francis Dudgeon, late 5th Battalion, the King's Own Scottish Borderers. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Joseph Alfred Bradney, commanding 2nd Battalion, the Monmouthshire Regiment. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Philip Hugh Dalbiac, commanding 2nd London Divisional Transport and Supply Column. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Charles Elton Longmore, commanding 1st Battalion, the Hertfordshire Regiment. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Edward James Moore, late 20th Battalion, the London Regiment. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel the Honourable Henry Cubitt, commanding Surrey Yeomanry. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel George Milne, commanding 1st Highland Brigade Royal Field Artillery. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Walter Robert Ludlow, commanding 8th Battalion, the Royal Warwickshire Regiment. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Richard Beale Colvin, CB, late Essex Yeomanry. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Henry Dean Erskine, commanding Northumbrian Transport and Supply Column. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel James William Greig, MP, late 14th Battalion, the London Regiment. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Thomas George Ewan, commanding Lancashire and Cheshire Royal Garrison Artillery. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Harry Langdon, commanding Lancashire Fortress Royal Engineers. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel John Henry Woodward, late 4th Battalion, the Gloucestershire Regiment. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Edward Fruin, commanding Royal East Kent Yeomanry. Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel Henry John Edwards, Cambridge University Officers Training Corps. Major and Honorary Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Fanshawe Hoare, 1st Battalion, the Hertfordshire Regiment. Walter Edward Archer, ESQ. Vincent Wilberforce Baddeley, ESQ. Roland Bailey, ESQ, M. VOI. S.O. Ernley Robertson Hay Blackwell, ESQ. Henry Farnham Burke, ESQ, C. V.O. Herbert Simon Carey, ESQ. Charles Archer Cook, ESQ. Joseph Patrick Crowley, ESQ. Bertram Blackiston Cubitt, ESQ. Malcolm de Levine, ESQ. Alfred Hull Dennis, ESQ. Lionel Earl, ESQ, C. M. G. Edward George Harmon, ESQ. Charles Harris, ESQ. Henry Frank Heath, ESQ, Ph.D. Frederick George Kenyon, ESQ, D. Lit. Stanley Leiths, ESQ. Frederick Francis Liddell, ESQ. Francis Herman Lucas, ESQ. Bernard Mallet, ESQ. Charles Murray Marling, ESQ, C. M. G. Roderick Sinclair Michael John, ESQ. William Grenfell Max Muller, ESQ, M. V.O. Major Malcolm Donald Murray, C. V.O. Edward O'Farrell, ESQ. Rear Admiral Sir Charles Langdale Otley, K. C. M. G. M. V. O. Edward Rigg, ESQ, I. S.O. Michael Ernest Sadler, ESQ. William Rose Smith, ESQ. Charles Henry Wren Stansfield, ESQ. Sir Henry Tanner, I.S.O. William James Dixon Walker, ESQ. George Waller Wilcox, ESQ. M.I. C.E. Joseph George Willis, ESQ. Order of Merit, Sir George Otto Trevelyan, Bart. Al. D. D.C.L. Sir Edward Elgar, Al. D. Order of the Star of India, Knight Grand Commander General Sir Dighton Macnaghten Coburn, VC, GCB, GCVO, KCSI, ISO, Knight Commander Krishna Govinda Gupta, CSI, Member of the Council of India.